The nuclear bomb, Apollo 11, the World Wide Web. Pfft, each of them footnotes in the 20th century when compared to the subject of today's tale. That's right, baby. We're talking Bigfoot. For 100 years, mankind has chased its mysterious hairy cousin who lurks in the woods of the Pacific Northwest. And boy, have we tried to capture it in all sorts of ways. On camera, in a zoo, actually even in the grave. But nobody has ever put their hands on a Bigfoot. The mysterious ape man remains out of reach, forever tantalizing men with a peek from behind a great redwood or a 19-inch footprint by a gas station. And if you're starting to wonder whether you could do it, capture Bigfoot, well, I'm gonna stop you right there. It can't be done. Oh, don't believe me? Well, sit back and listen then to the tale of Fred Beck, the man who once looked Bigfoot in the eye, pulled the trigger, and thought he saw him die, only to realize, to his astonishment, Bigfoot cannot be killed. Thanks so much to Trade Coffee for making the myth of an amazing cup of Joe brewed at home a reality. Wait, stop for a second. Listen, there's something here. Something in the woods. Do you hear that? Bigfoot? No. Well, maybe, but what I'm talking about hearing is money. That's what the loggers, hunters, trappers, and prospectors of the 19th and 20th century heard when they descended upon the wild and misty Pacific Northwest. A promise of fortune Fred Beck was determined to collect on. He, with 4 other prospectors, had been making a killing in the gold-stuffed forests surrounding Mount St. Helen. And with a legitimate claim staked upon the land, they didn't have to worry about competition, and with their semi-automatic rifles strapped to their backs, they didn't have to worry about things like bears either. Bears probably being the only creatures that would ever be able to give them any trouble anyway, right? But trouble, real trouble, began on an expedition in the summer of 1924. Of course, that was before anyone had even heard the word Bigfoot. So when one of the prospectors noticed some large humanoid footprints around their camp, they didn't know what to think. A bear couldn't leave a track that looked like a man's, but then again, what man has a 19-inch foot? This thing is huge. Also, around the same time, they began to hear weird whistling every evening. One long whistle, then another. As if in communication. What was going on, they wondered? Was someone pranking them? Wait, maybe someone was trying to scare them away from their fortune. Well, no way. They weren't going to be spooked from their meal ticket so easily. But then one afternoon, Fred Beck went with another prospector to fetch water from a spring. And on their way, they saw something really strange. Across the canyon, they caught a glimpse of a creature peeking out at them from behind a tree. 7 feet tall, with long pointy ears, naked and covered in dark hair. Not quite an ape, and not exactly a man. Was that the thing that made the footprints? That whistled in the evenings? Oh, was it a threat, or was it definitely not human? Well, those were all questions the other prospector that Fred brought along didn't bother to ask before he fired his gun across the canyon 3 times. Fred then joined in the trigger-happy jubilee until the creature stumbled away, vanishing between the trees. When Fred and his companion returned to the rest of the prospectors in their log cabin, they explained what happened and described as best they could the creature they'd seen. The other fellow said, "Okay, well, let's break this all down. There seem to be 3 options here. 1, that the creature was a bear, and you just made it angry in its own house. 2, it was a monster, and in that case you definitely should have killed it when you had the chance. Or 3, it was actually a man, and you might've just committed murder." After a long, quiet pause, all the men agreed on one thing. Get out of the woods and go home quickly. Ugh. But now night had fallen, and they didn't trust going through the woods in the dark. They'd have to hold up in the cabin overnight and then leave first thing in the morning. So they doused their lanterns and curled up tight in their bunk beds, holding their breaths in hope the woods wouldn't strike back. Then something hit the roof. Oh God. The cabin was under attack! But by what? Now, there were no windows in this cabin, so all they could do was squint through the gaps of the logs and try to figure out what the hell was going on. And it was there Fred saw it. A similar shape. Then another. 3 of them at least. Shrouded in darkness, but as large as the creature they'd shot at that afternoon. Meanwhile, the other men began sticking their guns through the gaps and firing blindly at the shadows, which then choked the cabin with gun smoke. Then, they heard something much larger than a rock land on the roof. The creature itself. It began tearing away at the logs. Then another creature was at the wall, trying to push the whole cabin over. And oh my god, what was that? One of the creatures was opening the cabin door. Half of the men threw their weight at the door, barricading it with a pole, while others fired volley after volley toward the unknown assailants surrounding them. That is, until one of them got a bright idea. "Stop shooting!" he cried. "If we leave them alone, maybe they'll leave us be." Oh, but it was far too late for that. A hairy arm burst through the wall and grabbed at an axe. And before it could take a swing, one of the prospectors fired point blank at its arm, and the shaggy mirage let go and disappeared. This onslaught continued for hours, the beast's rage not abating, and the prospectors holding their ground by the grace of the cabin's sturdy woodwork and all of their indiscriminate shooting. But as night dragged into morning, the battle did eventually slow to a stop. Heck, when the sun actually rose in the sky, it might as well have been a period on the end of the fighting. It seemed like it was all over. But when Fred and his gang emerged from the smoky cabin into the gray, hazy morning, shaken and exhausted, not 80 yards away, one creature still stood, catching its breath at the edge of a canyon. And it was just as Fred remembered it from the day before. 7 feet tall, hairy, neither ape nor man. But here, in the cold light of day, after a fevered battle, Fred saw, like truly saw, the creature for the first time, before promptly shooting it in the back. 3 times. Then it tumbled into the ravine, falling hundreds of feet to the creek below, and the prospectors ran. Once back at civilization, of course they couldn't help but talk about what had happened. It was too wild of a story, but when the Forest Service investigated and found no body at the bottom of the canyon where Fred reported firing, and no signs of any creatures at all, maybe they said the prospectors just thought they were shooting at monsters, but they were actually bears. And, the rocks at the cabin could have been courtesy of unruly teenagers. Heck, come to think of it, maybe they staged all the footprints themselves as a hoax. But while the majority of folks didn't believe Fred and his friends, there were others who knew exactly what the men had seen. In California, the Hoopa call it Oma. To the Sta'alis people of British Columbia, it's called Thaskats, a race of wild men and women, possibly shapeshifters, spiritually bound to the woods of the Pacific Northwest. Giant, muscular, and powerful, but also careful and curious. Fish in the wrong spot, they say, and they'll gently caution you away with a rock to the head. These indigenous peoples had known about this creature and lived with it for thousands of years, whereas the Fred Becks of the world only met it in the 20th century, called it Bigfoot, and then tried to kill it. The keyword there being tried, because it's believed that Bigfoots are still out there, and that it's important that they are, to protect the woods, to protect nature itself. Because it actually doesn't just live in the woods. It's said that it is the woods. That Bigfoot is an avatar of nature itself. And if that is true, I believe it's vital that Bigfoot not be killed. For if somehow Bigfoot were to die, nature would die along with it, and so too would we all. And we don't want that, right? Nature's given us so many amazing things. Sunshine, water, soil, beans, fire, ceramic mugs, espresso machines. Wait, I think I lost the thread. Or did I? Yo, I am so excited that Trade Coffee is back sponsoring our shows because they have quickly become the go-to caffeine delivery system for a bunch of us at EC. Seriously, we drink a lot of coffee and cannot afford to run out. I have had legit nightmares about that, which is why getting fresh new roasts delivered to our door from Trade's roster of over 50 independent roasters, using ethically and sustainably sourced beans, of course, is just perfect for us. Because their whole thing is to enable you to make the best cup of coffee at home, specifically to your tastes every day. Case in point, this last week, I wanted to try something a bit on the lighter side, right? So Trade helped me select a great blend from a local Brooklyn roaster, which, side note, had some badass art on the bag, ground it perfectly for my beloved French press, and delivered it fresh to my doorstep so it was ready to make the moment it arrived. Oh, the taste is strong with this one. Whereas Jeff continued down the path of the dark side of roasts and ordered whole beans from the West Coast to use in his fancy schmancy imperial espresso machine. Dang, looks like we both got the high ground this time, am I right? Okay, promise that was the last one. So if you'd like to join us in upgrading your morning routine with just a way better cup of coffee, right now, Trade Coffee is offering all you fine folks one free bag of coffee with any subscription if you use our link, drinktrade.com/extra credits. Then once you sign up, not only will you be getting the best beans in the business, but in all honesty, you'll be making us look really good to a sponsor we love working with, so thank you very much for that, and please keep it up. Once again, that is drinktrade.com/extra credits. The link, of course, is in the description, or you can click right up there if it's easier. And yeah, thanks so much for listening. If you're a coffee lover, I think you're really gonna love this. Happy brewing. Say, did you ever hear the one about Skylar Holmes, Kuya Koi, Joseph Blame, Dominic Valenciana, Casey Muscha, Arclight Games, Angela Valenciana, and Ahmad Ziad Turk being fantastic legendary patrons? Because I sure did.